What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Seahawks Now, your home for all things daily Seahawks news, rumors, and updates. Today, like I said we would do yesterday, today we're doing a video just basically talking about Jaxson Dart and how I think he could fit in Seattle. I believe Jaxson Dart, if the Seahawks were going to take a quarterback, a project quarterback in this year's draft, I would like it to be Jaxson Dart out of Ole Miss. He was a Heisman finalist. He put together a great run at Ole Miss, great numbers. And I want to talk about just why I think he would fit in Seattle and look at some numbers, but also go beyond the stats, talk about some of the intangibles, some of the leadership qualities that I've seen out of Jaxson Dart, and why I think he could actually outperform his draft projections. So first off, Jaxson Dart, let's take a look at his draft profile. This is according to his NFL.com profile written by Lance Zierlein. He says Dart has a stocky build and average physical attributes, but good makeup and intangibles. He's fairly accurate and rarely overcomplicates things for himself. Well, that's good to hear that he doesn't overcomplicate things, but I will say the NFL.com writers don't seem to be super high on Jaxson Dart. Looking at his combine profile, he does have some strengths. His strengths include getting across the full field of progressions when he needs to. It says he has good situational decision-making on third downs. He throws with adequate accuracy. Notice adequate, not good, but adequate. And drive velocity between the hashes. Recognizes potential trouble and gets away from it. Beats man coverage when making predetermined throws. Very accurate with his back shoulder fades. That's good to see. Runs with early acceleration and vision. And uses altered snap counts to draw the defense into committing pre-snap penalties. So you're like, man, that sounds like a good quarterback. Here's what they have as his weaknesses. They say his deep zone coverages slowed his momentum and consistency. He has room for improvement with anticipatory throws. Lazy footwork forces him into muscled throws at times. He displayed inconsistencies with decisiveness. He lacks delivery quickness to afford getting behind on progressions. His throws feel very labored when he's forced to work off platform, and his deep throws lack energy and force receivers to break stride. Yikes. So that is about 7 weaknesses that they list. They actually have him compared to Gardner Minshew. That's his NFL comparison. Although he says teams might see physical and play similarities between Dart and Brock Purdy, but such a pathway for Dart likely requires a balanced ball control passing attack that allows him to manage the game instead of driving it. So looking at the way that the NFL.com beat writers talk about Jaxson Dart, they seem to think that he's no more than a game manager. They've compared him to Gardner Minshew and Brock Purdy. Now, if Brock Purdy is the best he's going to be, then I would be very cautious on drafting Jaxson Dart because I still don't think Brock Purdy is all that great of a quarterback. I think he's, around the same level as Geno potentially, but Brock Purdy's not a star quarterback by any means of the word. And if Jaxson Dart, if they think that his ceiling is Brock Purdy, why am I so interested in this guy? Well, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, but first let's talk about just his availability. Will Jaxson Dart be available for the Seahawks? Well, yes, he absolutely will be available for the Seahawks. Jaxson Dart, he's not going in the late first round. I mean, I think that is pretty clear at this point. Jaxson Dart will be available if the Seahawks want him. He's going to be available at number 18, and he's probably going to be available, to be honest, he's probably going to be available in the second round as well. So I think that if the Seahawks wanted him, he will be there to draft, and that's obviously half the battle is just having a guy who's available, because when you look at Shedeur Sanders, he's not going to be available. He's going to go in the top 5. The Seahawks don't have a top 5 pick. So, daydreaming about Shedeur Sanders, probably not worth anybody's time, just because he's not going to be there for the Seahawks to draft. But Jaxson Dart will be there. He's going to be there. Right now, I believe he's the third best quarterback in this draft class behind Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. There are some people that don't believe that. There are some people that would put other guys ahead of him. Personally, I'm a little bit higher on Jaxson Dart. And part of the reason is because of these stats. I mean, you have to admit, these are great numbers. Jaxson Dart last season, 29 touchdowns, 4,279 yards, 6 interceptions, 69.3% completion percentage, and a 180.7 passer rating. He actually led all of college football in both completion percentage and in passer rating at 180.7. He had an insane season, a tremendous season. He was a Heisman candidate. There's no reason to think that was a bad year. Now, what people look at is they say, well, he underperformed because Ole Miss lost 3 games. That's true. They did lose 3 games. They didn't make the playoffs. But Jaxson Dart, it's hard for me to really put some fault on him because they were the number 1 offense in the league last year, and they didn't have necessarily household name receivers either. I mean, that offense was cooking. When they were on point, they were on point. And I think that might be kind of what we saw in that draft profile, which is basically saying, look, when he's on, he's great, but when he gets rattled, he starts to make mistakes. And that is, that's probably why they look at him as more of a game manager than a superstar. But he has a few star characteristics, notably his arm, right? Guys, look at Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, he made himself with his arm. Same as Ben Roethlisberger. Those guys made themselves because they could throw the football. They didn't make themselves because they had great decision-making early in their career. They didn't make themselves because they could escape the pocket early in their career. They made it because of their arm. And I think Jaxson Dart has one of the best arms, maybe the best, in this draft class. He's not being compared, though, to guys like Rodgers or guys like Matthew Stafford. He's being compared to Gardner Minshew, and that's what I just don't necessarily. I think he can be better than Gardner Minshew. I think he can be better than Brock Purdy because I think that because of just how good his arm is and how good he can throw a deep ball, I think that he's going to be a better player than those guys. Because I would not trust Brock Purdy to throw a bunch of deep balls. I think I would trust Jaxson Dart to throw a bunch of deep balls. And again, comparisons are not everything. Patrick Mahomes was not compared to be what he has turned out to be, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes, he was seen when he was picked number 10 overall, that was seen as an overdraft. That people thought Mitch Trubisky and Deshaun Watson would be better than Patrick Mahomes. So you really can't take those for granted. Just want to show him his career stats. This is 3 years as a starter. He had a total passer rating of 158.4, a total completion percentage of 65.2%. He threw for nearly 12,000 yards, so almost an average of 4,000 per season. Ends up going for 81 touchdowns, so an average there of almost 30 a year, about 27 touchdowns a year. And he threw 27 interceptions for an average of 9 a year. But he clearly improved because if you take away his senior year, the senior year numbers are much better. Only 6 picks. That means he threw 21 over the last 2 years. 29 touchdowns, which means over the last 2 years, he would have thrown 52. So that would be an average of 25 per season. So he definitely improved pretty drastically, I think, for his senior year. Also had career highs in completion percentage, career high in passer rating. He basically had career highs in every single stat last year. But I want to go beyond the stats for a second with Jaxson Dart because I think that's important to do. Stats obviously don't tell the whole story. So what do I really love about Jaxson Dart? I think he has great leadership. I think he comes from a pro-style, great-looking college offense that I think can translate. And yes, I love his arm. I think he has one of the best arms, maybe the best arm in college football last year. Watching him play for Ole Miss, it was very clear he was the best player out of the SEC. Very clear to me that he was a better quarterback than, say, Carson Beck at Georgia, than Jalen Milroe in Alabama, and I do believe he is better as well than Quinn Ewers at Texas. I think some people might disagree with that. Some people might say that Quinn Ewers is better. I don't agree with that. I think I would rather have Jaxson Dart. And what I love about Jaxson Dart is that he's not this flashy guy, right? He's not Cam Ward making comments that, if a team doesn't draft him, then they're making a mistake. He's not Shador with his flashy dad and with his flashy, Heisman campaigns and everything. Jaxson Dart's just a dude. He's just a dude who plays football at a really high level. And if his ceiling is Brock Purdy, then yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily be interested because Brock Purdy, even with a super team around him, the best he could do was lose to Mahomes in the Super Bowl. However, you could also flip it around and say he actually did get to the Super Bowl, so maybe that would be good to have a guy who can get you to the Super Bowl. And if Jaxson Dart, if that's his peak comparison is Brock Purdy, maybe that is a good thing. I don't know. I will say this. The one caution to the wind with Dart is that he is not a mobile. He's not a super mobile guy. And in today's NFL, most of the great quarterbacks are mobile, right? Mahomes has some mobility. Josh Allen, very mobile. Lamar's very mobile. Jalen Hurts very mobile. Jaden Daniels is very mobile. But that doesn't mean that Jaxson Dart could not succeed. There also are guys who don't have that mobility that have been good, right? Joe Burrow, we don't think of as a mobile quarterback, and he's been great. He's been elite at times. Matthew Stafford, same thing. We don't think of him as super mobile. He's been elite. Jared Goff, when things have been going well, has been really, really, really good and has taken the Lions to a very high level. He's not a guy we consider mobile. And even looking back, I mean, just 5 years ago, Brady and Rodgers in their upper 30s and early 40s were winning MVPs. Both of them were mobile as a younger player, but both of them, by the time they had gotten up past the age of 35, they were not considered mobile. And we saw Rodgers, Brady, Drew Brees as well competing for MVPs. None of them were mobile, and they were still playing at a very high level. So I don't think that simply because, yes, a lot of today's best quarterbacks are pretty fairly mobile, that doesn't mean you can't succeed as a pocket passer, because even right now, if you look at the top 10 quarterbacks, I think we would all agree that at least Burrow and Stafford are in that conversation. They are not mobile quarterbacks. Jared Goff, I think, is a top 10 quarterback, and CJ Stroud, also a very young quarterback. I think he's in my top 10, 11, 12. He's not super mobile. Justin Herbert's not super mobile. So the idea that just because he's not mobile means that his ceiling is Brock Purdy, I don't think that's accurate at all. With that all being said, though, guys, I want to hear your comments down below. Let me know, do you agree that Jaxson Dart would make a great fit for the Seahawks, or do you disagree? I want to hear it. With that all being said, we'll see you guys tomorrow, and as always, go Seahawks.